Welcome, everyone. My name is Piper Hendricks. I'm the CEO of Stories Change Power, and we are so glad that you're here. If you've attended before our webinars, you know that we start with a song that our speaker selects, and I'll introduce Claire in just a moment. And I'll be curious if she did this intentionally, but today, as we're talking about breaking down media bubbles, Billy Joel's Vienna sounds pretty perfect. It's a song that begins with a piano melody on the right hand and chords on the left, meaning they're working together. And with the regular key changes, there's a rising feeling to that song. As the lyrics counsel patience, which seems really appropriate for something that was released on a B-side back in 1977 and has now grown to be Billy Joel's third most streamed song on Spotify. So the good news is the good ideas we're talking about today are growing in popularity too. We will get into all that in just a moment. First, I want to share a quick note about Stories Change Power, and that is that we provide practical and effective advocacy strategies to people and organizations who want to make a difference in their neighborhoods, their communities, and their country. And you'll find what we mean about being on the yellow loop with us on our website. And be sure that you're staying in the loop with us on LinkedIn. You'll see some links, as I mentioned, those are magically popping up. I want to thank Rebecca Messer for her tech support today. She is the person behind that magic. And I'll highlight four quick things before I introduce today's speaker. And just one, we have the chat open for constructive conversations. Where you've got questions, please put those. There should be a Q&A, a little box with a question mark at the bottom of your screen. Put your questions there. And if we can't reach those during our section for questions today, we'll get to those in an upcoming newsletter or on LinkedIn. Two, we have captions enabled. So please use those if they are helpful to you. Three, if there are any tech difficulties, don't worry. We are recording and we'll share that recording with you. And fourth, remember, you are off camera and off mic, so do what you need to do to take care of you and be fully present. There is a lot moving right now, including the fact that we are now 38 days away from the presidential election. And with all that's in the news, it is really an important time to hear from all sides, a public benefit corporation that helps people strengthen our democratic society through balanced news coverage. Their mission says so much. They work to free people from filter bubbles so they can better understand the world and each other. And so I am delighted to have Claire Ashcraft join us today to talk about how All Sides is achieving that mission. Claire is the bridging coordinator and media bias analyst at All Sides. She has worked across political differences for 3 years and is passionate about how analyzing word choice shapes our perception. So Claire, I hope you will forgive me as I say you are a fellow word nerd. I say that with much respect. It is so important. And of her many hobbies, the one that I'll highlight today is one that we could all likely do a little bit more of, and that is meditating to stay sane in the midst of the 24-hour news cycle. So Claire, welcome. I am so glad you're here with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
We will move into Claire's presentation in just a moment. First, it is always helpful for us to get a sense of who has joined today. So we'll start with a poll rather, that has 3 questions, and that will be popping up shortly. The questions that you'll see are: how long have you worked in advocacy? Do you think that media bias is a problem? And do you read multiple news sources? This is not a graded test, so please no pressure, but it's helpful for us to know. Just pop in your answers here. If you're not able to access the poll, use the chat. That's a great option as well. But when we ask how long you've worked in advocacy, we've got several options: less than 2 years, a good while, 3 to 7 and beyond. If you don't work in advocacy, there is an answer for you as well. Who said anything about advocacy? That last one there, if you work in a different field. Second question, do you think media bias is a problem? I've got some options there. And then third question, do you read multiple news sources? Again, no wrong answers. We are just getting a sense of where folks are. I am seeing lots of answers coming in. I'll give folks a few more seconds. There we go. All right. And then you should see the results popping up here. It looks like we've got a good balance, Claire, of folks, some who are brand new in advocacy, a few pros who have been here more than 10 years, and then a good number of folks who are in a different field. So welcome. Very glad that you're here as well. media bias and all that we're going to be talking about is relevant to everybody. When we ask folks if you think media bias is a problem, half of folks say yes, I see it in the news regularly and it makes me distrustful of the media. A few folks saying yes, they see media bias, but only on one side of the political spectrum. Others say, somewhat, but it seems to be overblown. And no one who joined today thinks that media bias is not a problem, to use a double negative there, but you follow me. Lastly, on multiple news sources, we've got about half folks who are reading multiple news sources to get a full picture, and then a few who read, a few of their favorites. And that's great. So I will thank you everybody for weighing in. And with Claire, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here. Thank you all for joining. I'll just share my screen here. So I'm Claire. I'm based in Dayton, Ohio. I'm the bridging coordinator and media bias analyst at All Sides. I've also put my email there, and I'll share it again at the end in case any of you have any questions following this webinar that are specific to All Sides or interested in more resources. And please feel free to pop any questions in the Q&A section as I'm going here today, and I'll be sure to try and answer them at the end. So I wanted to start with a little bit of setup about the problem. Many of you might feel that we live in a highly polarized society today. I would say that's true, and I've definitely seen that myself. We're also living in a low trust society. The latest Gallup polling is that 34% of people feel like they have a fair or good amount of trust in the media, and 38% say they have no trust whatsoever in media, right? And that's a real problem as we're trying to get informed for an election. If you want to be an informed voter, but you don't trust the media because you feel like it's lying, there's misinformation, and there's bias, then that creates difficulty for democratic society and for voters to not be informed. And it also opens us up to manipulation, be it from foreign powers or unintentionally from domestic outlets. Like in this image here that I have, outlets might be more sensational and show you the image on the left, but not show you the image on the right. And you kind of need both to get the full context of what is going on in the media sphere. And kind of separately, but not unrelated, we're losing trust in each other and in the people next to us through polarization. And that's not unrelated from the media because shout out if you were at last month's webinar with More Like Us, you might know that they have really important data about the perception gap that shows the more news you read, actually the further from reality your perceptions of the other side are, right? So the more news I read, if I lean liberal, I might think conservatives believe something that they don't actually believe, and vice versa. And when we don't really trust each other, we tend to retreat to our tribalist instincts, to people who are like us. And that further polarizes us when we're only reading people and listening to people who are like us and news outlets who are like us. We don't understand the other side's concerns and we don't get the full picture. And we're more likely to believe that the other side is evil or unreasonable, rather than actually talking to them and understanding where they're coming from. So in this environment where we don't have trust in each other, we don't have trust in the media, all sides, sure, we're a news company, but we're also very invested in this social good to try and rebuild not only trust in the media, but dialogues that we can build trust in our societies and each other. So our mission is to free people from filter bubbles so they can better understand the world and each other. And there are a few ways that we try and accomplish that and services that we offer. One is offering balanced news and issues. So we try and show you news from the left, right, and center every single day about the biggest headlines. And we do the same with issues. We have not only just news headlines, but blogs breaking down ideas like, should we switch more to electric vehicles? How big of a problem is cancel culture, if at all? And we'll break down different stances that people might have on those issues that don't always fall along a simple left-right spectrum. Things are nuanced based on the experiences that we have, and we do try and capture that as good as possible while also keeping it kind of simple for people to understand. So now I'll just take a moment to show you what our homepage looks like um, here, and you can see what our news headlines look like that you see every day. You see a headline from the left, right, and center. And then if you were to click on the news story, you get 250 words. We try and tell you what the story is, why it's important, and how the left and the right covered it differently. So that's really core to our ethos, um, to show you the top stories. And then we have an extensive list of individual articles from the left, right, and center, because sometimes the left and right have different priorities, right? Bias shows up in many different ways, and one of them can be that they're not even covering the same thing or interested in it. So that is what our news looks like. And then we also provide, excuse me, let me fix my PowerPoint here. We also provide media bias ratings. So we rate nearly 3,000 sources at this point. And we do that through primarily two methods. One is our panel of experts. We will have a multi-partisan panel of two people on the left, right, and center look at an outlet and discuss what they think the bias rating is. And then we also survey all Americans. We survey Americans and we strip the branding. So we don't tell you this is coming from Fox News or CNN. We just show people the headlines and say, do you think this is on the right or the left? And they rate it. And then we take a combination of what our team thinks and what average Americans think about the rating of different news outlets to come to those ratings. And then those ratings fuel our balanced news so that we can make sure that we're trying to give you all perspectives on all days of the week. And then our last offering is civil dialogue services as well. So we're very involved in helping in the bridging space. We also have a schools program where we've launched something called Mismatch, and we allow actually classrooms to pair up students from different areas in a number of different ways, whether it's different socioeconomically, racially, many different things, rural urban divide, so that students have the chance to early on in their life understand other people's various experiences, even if they don't have the opportunity to travel. So a little bit more about our media bias ratings. Our most viral thing that you may have seen is our media bias chart over here on the right, where we have some of the most popular sources rated and put in their respective categories: left, lean left, center, lean right, or right. And the goal of this is to make bias transparent. So we believe that everyone is biased. Unbiased news doesn't truly exist. And that it's okay that everyone is biased as long as they're transparent about that. And we encourage people to read laterally across this media bias chart, not just read in the center category, because the center can at times exclude things as well, right? So we encourage people to read from the left, right, and center every day. And a way this might be useful, not just when you're personally reading the news and understanding, where your news sources lay on the spectrum, but in the realm of advocacy, I think it's important to look at how the issue that you're advocating for is covered by different news organizations across the spectrum, if it's covered by both at all. If an issue you're advocating for only tends to be a concern to the left or the right, I think that's worth noting as well. So it can be useful to kind of mentally categorize where each outlet is, but also, be both open-minded and critical of each article you read, because each journalist might be a little bit different. On that note about specific articles, this is our latest AI tool that I wanted to give you a little introduction to. It is called the Bias Tracker. It's our first venture into AI, and it is an AI model trained on how all sides looks for bias in articles. And then you can paste in a link from any news article that you've read, and it will give you a bias rating, an explanation, and a detailed analysis. There's also an opportunity for you to give feedback because it is AI. And so as we get more feedback, we can train it to be better and better. But I did want to show you how this works. in case you're curious. So here is our bias checker, and I'm going to take this MSNBC article and put it in the bias checker, and it will give me a rating. So here it's saying it's -7, which is all the way on the left. Our scale goes from -9 to +9, which would be all the way on the right. And it gives us an explanation here. It demonstrates left bias through critical language and negative portrayal of Elon Musk. And then you can also get a detailed analysis where it will pull out some specific phrases from the article and say, this is sensationalism, calling Elon Musk sensorial cyberbullying. Now, this was an opinion piece, so you might want to look for bias in specific news pieces. That is when bias is typically harder to detect. But I just thought this was a really stark example. So you're welcome to use this as a news consumer to just play with it, see how there is bias in certain articles that you're interested in reading. But also as someone, if you are involved in advocacy, then it might be interesting to take some articles that you've written or an organization you may work with has written and see what the bias rating is according to the bias checker. Because I think it is important to understand how other people might perceive your work.
Claire, if I may, I really appreciate that suggestion. I'm curious if you've had groups or know of anyone who's used the bias checker and been surprised by what they found, or can you share a bit more about how people are using this new tool?
Yeah, I think people at this point are just using it out of a sense of curiosity to see what it might say, whether they think that it's a reliable tool to use. We actually just recently showed it to a classroom of high schoolers, and we had them test it and provide us feedback if it saw any issues where it thought that the analysis was, unfair or struggling at any points. Um, so a lot of times we're using it because it's kind of in the testing phase right now, but I think people are often surprised by the different types of bias. So you can see this tool highlights 16 types of bias. Those are the ones that we have identified. And I think a lot of people, when they think of bias, they just think, oh, if it's like um, pro pro-choice versus pro-life, then it's on the left versus on the right. When things may not be that simple, there are some things that are a little bit sneakier to catch in terms of adjectives people might use, or in facts that they might omit that someone on the left might think is important and someone on the right might not think is important. So I think it's useful in helping people understand that there are many different types of bias and many ways that they can appear rather than just the stories they're choosing or the framing that they're kind of using for the story.
That makes a ton of sense. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but you mentioned the 16 types of bias. Is there a place on the tool people can go and see what those 16 are?
There is. So right here, when it says detailed analysis, right at the top, it says this tool highlights 16 types of bias, and that links to our 16 types of bias blog. So you can do a deep dive into that for sure.
I will absolutely be doing a deep dive later today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So excited to share that tool. And as I said, you can use it in your news consumption, but it also might be helpful to look at your own writing if you have links to it and see what types of bias it pulls out that you might not identify or think of. The next tool I just wanted to throw out to you guys is our red blue translator. So one of the types of bias that we see really commonly is word choice bias. Um, a simple example is the left oftentimes says undocumented immigrant and the right often says illegal immigrant. At all sides, we use the term unauthorized immigrant in an effort to kind of avoid that dichotomy. And the red blue translator is a list of several hundred terms in there. And what it does is you click on a term and it tells you how the left and the right perceive that term. So we have things like, climate change denier, pro-choice, freedom, different words that might mean different things or be perceived differently by different groups. Again, it's not always a simple left-right. We also have things like artificial intelligence in there, and we describe the kind of pro-artificial intelligence versus the anti-AI perspective. And we try and break down what those mean and how they're perceived by different groups of people when they hear that word. And if you are in advocacy communications, this might be really useful because if you use a word a lot when you're writing, say you're doing climate change advocacy, if you go and look at how people perceive the word climate change skeptic, then that's a useful thing, I think, to know about how different groups look at different things. So word choice bias is a big identifier, um, and this tool will hopefully help you navigate it a little bit. And then now I want to move on to our Similarity Hub. This was something that we created with More Like Us, and it's essentially a free database of public opinion data focused on where Americans agree. So there's over 20 hot button topics, and we just updated it with hundreds of new data and polls. And so you can go to the Similarity Hub, pull up whatever topic you're interested in, and you can see like this graphic on the bottom that majority of Democrats and Republicans agree that the role of money in politics is at least somewhat of a threat. That's something that Americans vastly agree on. And we include the Similarity Hub statistics at the bottom of all of our news headline roundups. And then we'll include them in our newsletters as well, and sometimes blogs, because we think it's really important in these polarized times that we do understand where we agree and where we have differences. We don't want to force common ground where it doesn't exist, but at the same time, media often over amplifies the negative, right? And that's why reading so much news can give you an actually distorted perception of the other side, because people don't understand where Americans agree because news outlets don't think it's newsworthy to note where everyone agrees, right? But nonetheless, it's a fact and an important fact to recognize when all Americans are on board with something, especially on polarizing issues. And so if you work in advocacy for a particular issue, this might be a great place to start and see where Americans vastly agree on the issue you're interested in. And that might be a great place to start. If you're looking to convince people towards a particular conclusion, it's really useful to know where they agree so that we can disagree accurately, right? That's a common phrase in the bridging community now, is that we're looking to disagree accurately and disagree better rather than make everyone agree. All sides wouldn't exist if there weren't different opinions on the right and the left. And I think it's great because when we have that kind of tension between the left and the right, we often come to better solutions. But this helps us understand where we actually disagree so we can do it better and more effectively, while also highlighting the fact that we might not be as far apart as we think. The last tool that I was interested in mentioning here are our topics and issues pages. So we have a topics section on our homepage that lists a number of different topics that are in the news and issues that you might be interested in. Here, I've just pulled up our 2024 presidential election page. And this essentially just collects our latest news headline roundups and blogs on the issue and might link to any Red Blue Translator terms. So this is a useful place to go if you're in advocacy work and you're interested in a particular issue. Then here you'll find the most recent news stories about it, how the left and the right have covered that issue differently. And then also we might have useful blogs on the issue in terms of what are the different positions, such as our All Stances blog, where we kind of break those down on a particular question. Um, and so I think this is a great stop if you're looking to dive deep into our resources on a specific issue that you want to drill down, something like abortion, climate change, healthcare, any of the above, and really start here to understand how the left and the right and the center to think differently about an issue. And so, go ahead.
This is so helpful, Claire. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I I feel like there's so many different tools here. And so I'm curious where, and I really appreciate you highlighting where folks specifically in advocacy can dig in to support their work. With all of this, where would you recommend people start? Like and how can they use All Sides, daily, weekly, monthly? Like what would your recommendations among all of this be?
I would say my recommendation to start would just be to start checking the homepage every day. We always post 4 to 5 big news stories every day, and you can kind of get a feel for if you read how the media covered it in our news headline roundups, you can start to get a feel for what are the tendencies of the left and the right, and how do they cover things, and some of the different news sources we might point to that you might not have heard of. I know even working in this job, I've gained so much knowledge about what particular news outlets like to cover and are good for different issues. Like I know which ones are interested in the economy versus which ones are interested in foreign policy. So I think it's an easy way to get familiar with things like that before really diving in. And then if you're interested in just like doing a deep dive into our resources right away, then I would also recommend going to a topics page if you're interested in a particular issue. And like I said, that will have recent news stories, but it will also have some blogs that you can look at. If you don't want to be overwhelmed, I understand our homepage can be a little overwhelming for people. Our Instagram is pretty popular as well, and we post our news stories on Instagram as well as our recent blogs. So we do feature opinions on our blog as well. And that's an easy way to just keep up kind of passively with what we're doing, is to just look at the homepage, look at the Instagram, familiarize yourself a little bit. And then if you're looking for something really specific as well, you can always shoot me an email or shoot our admin email a message and say what you're specifically looking for. But yeah, I would just say poke around, spend 30 minutes looking around at the resources we have. But if you don't have the time or just want it super simple, go to Instagram or go to our homepage and just look at the news stories that we have every day.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And I want to encourage folks, we've got the Q&A there, so please do not be shy. This is a time you can see the wealth of information that All Sides is providing. So please pop questions in as you have them. If you prefer to be anonymous, that's an option too, but don't be shy. A big picture question, Claire, and this, yeah, I'll throw a big one at you, but a key element of our approach at Stories Change Power is bridging divides and building trust. And you touched a lot on all this, but how would you say, how is All Sides accomplishing both of those, that bridging of divides and the building of trust?
Yeah, so to take the trust question first, I think we're really aimed towards transparency. We try to be transparent not only about media outlet bias, but be transparent about how we determine that. We don't want to just be arbiters of truth, nor do we want an information free for all, right? If everything looks like every guy on Twitter's opinion is of equal value, obviously our democratic society can't function that way, but nor can our democratic society function when journalists are just trying to lead you to a specific conclusion about what the truth is or what the right position is to hold. And so we try to kind of strike a middle ground and be useful and have trustworthy and robust ratings that people can use, and try not to paint anyone as the enemy. We say read from the left, right, and center, right? It's not a problem if an outlet is on the left or right as long as they're transparent about we're giving you the conservative perspective or the liberal perspective. So I think that that's a really important way of building trust. And then when it comes to bridging divides, that's a focus that we have. Our blog content is often about bridging specific divides. We have an Odd Couples series about just unlikely friendships between Democrats and Republicans. We try to make sure we're highlighting common ground and bipartisanship when it happens in the news. so that every time we're telling you something negative about the world falling apart, we're also trying to highlight when there are positive things that have real effects that are going on as well. And then the Similarity Hub is also a part of Bridging Divides about teaching Americans to understand that there is so much common ground and so much overlap that just doesn't get highlighted because it doesn't help anyone's bottom line. It doesn't tell them anything new to say, look, most Americans really agree that, we all hate money in politics. That's not important news to people, but it is important to understand for our mental health and just to have a full picture of what is going on in the world, we should understand where we agree and where we disagree. And so we try and highlight both agreement, common ground, bipartisanship, and the fact that when we disagree, we can also treat each other civilly. We can ask questions and be curious. We can form friendships across those divides. Um, and so we like to contribute in that way as well and make sure that it's a cornerstone of what we do to include both of those.
I appreciate that so much. It just really feels like a breath of fresh air. And I want to call out a comment that we got here from Julie Rose. If you have not heard Julie's podcast, there's both Uncomfy and Top of Mind. I highly recommend checking both out. They are also breaths of fresh air to hear more about, really insightful conversations, how people are having, including the uncomfy conversations, but how moving through that we can find more common ground than we realize. So thank you, Julie, for your comment and all of your wonderful work. Claire, I think we're done with the screen share, right? So I think if you don't mind stopping share screen, people can see you more closely. And again, encouraging folks, if you've got questions, please put those in the Q&A. I can ask questions for days. Most people who know me know that. So I'll just keep going here until we get some. How do you decide on the topics of the blogs? You mentioned at the top where you're looking at electric vehicles or cancel culture. How do you decide among all the different issues out there what to cover?
Yeah, a lot of times it's definitely a team effort, and we definitely have a backlog of things we're super interested in covering but haven't gotten to. We try and cover things that are timely. If something's in the news, and we know there's common ground on the issue, or someone has something to say, or there's misinformation out there, and we want to lay out the different narratives that the left and right are talking about, then we'll often put out a blog on those. But like I said, we have a giant list of things to get to, and a lot of times it comes down to who's really interested in taking on this topic at this point in time and doing a thorough breakdown. And I should also mention every blog that goes out is always reviewed by people on the left, right, and center. So we have kind of internal measures to make sure we're balanced and we're including everyone's perspectives and experiences as much as possible in every piece of content we produce to try and make sure we're giving people a balanced full picture, right? If that's our brand and we say that everyone is biased, then we can't just have one person produce something and hope that they did the research and got all the perspectives in, because naturally we have different inclinations to include different things. And so we try and make sure that everyone kind of brings their biases to the table, and make sure that they feel like this piece accurately represents how everyone feels.
I appreciate that so much. I think both as an individual, citizen reading from that perspective, but then also in advocacy, I can see reading a piece that has all those levels of review, knowing, this is something that is, people have found consensus on, that you've had that review from the left, the right, and center. So thank you. We're getting some great questions here. Joe, you're reading my mind. I was curious to hear more too about, I think this is around the civil dialogue services. And Joe asks, are you coordinating your efforts with StoryCorps or Braver Angels? Both of those organizations are improving civil dialogue. So are you working with folks there, Claire?
Yeah, we are. We're a part of the Braver Network with Braver Angels. So we're definitely involved keeping in contact with them, and highlighting some of their events as well. And their recent report on elections, where they came up with a bunch of points of agreement that the left and the right came to through common ground workshops about how we can have both secure elections and kind of make it easy to vote and participate in democracy. So we love to highlight those as part of our bridge building efforts. And we love to uplift StoryCorps' work as well. We're definitely interested in how we can uplift these efforts more, and we're going to start integrating more into our social media about our bridging mission, because I think a lot of people, they look at our website and they think of us as a news website, which isn't wrong. We do show news from the left, right, and center. But they see us highlighting divisions and not kind of working towards this other social good about bridging divides and depolarizing. And we really want to make sure that that touches all parts of our content, and that we're using those partnerships that we have with other organizations that are on the ground doing great work and highlighting them as well. Because at all sides, we have a focus on being scalable and like helping our democratic society and reaching the most people we can. But that also means that we don't have as much time to be on the ground with individuals having conversations. And so I think in the bridging space, every organization kind of has their niche and is doing their part in a different way. And so as much as we can highlight those organizations that are doing grassroots work as well and uplift that to a kind of more mainstream news audience, we want to be able to do that. So.
Absolutely. I'd echo that. I mean, everybody in this space all doing their part. We're having a really positive impact, which is important to remember in the midst. It can be easy when we're not tuning into some of these things to see more of the divides and the polarization. But for folks who are familiar with StoryCorps, you may know that they have began with conversations between people who know each other, a spouse, a mother-daughter, whatever the relationship. And now they've moved into folks who don't know each other and are talking across, as strangers or not with that same relationship. And it's just a fascinating series. So really encourage you to check those out. We've got a great question here from Julie, who asks, Claire, do you find that it's harder to find right-leaning views when looking for the left, right, and center on issues? The sense is that when there are more left-leaning mainstream outlets, I wonder if you feel like you have to go back to the same 4 or 5 right-leaning outlets to provide balance.
Yeah, that certainly is something we struggle with a bit. You can see on our media bias chart that the lean left column is pretty full and the lean right column is pretty sparse. So a lot of times we'll pair lean left perspectives with perspectives that are on the right. So not just lean right, but right. We kind of put those together. We have on the right and on the left as a whole. And we don't like perfectly balance full left, full right, lean left, lean right. But we do have to go back to some of the same outlets. And I would say something that really helps is we have a balance search tool on our website. So if you go to search something, you can search for it on our website, and then you can click search to the web, which uses Google, but you can sort by the left, right, and center. So I can look up a news story, be like election laws in Georgia, and I can filter for perspectives from the right. And though it uses Google's technology, if you just Google search or Bing search or Yahoo search, it buries perspectives on the right a lot. I can go through 10 pages of essentially lean left and center sources and not see anything from a source on the right when I just Google something. And so the balance search is a really useful tool when I'm trying to find a right-leaning perspective on something. And sometimes I have to go directly to a right-leaning website and look it up to actually see something, which I think is a real problem with our search tools that, kind of dominate the search industry, right? Google is like 90% of the search engine industry. But it's something that we're hopefully helping with our balance tool, and by us doing the work of kind of making sure we're digging up the best perspectives on the right and showing it to people. I think that's extremely helpful because, as I said, if they're Googling something and not seeing the right at all, for us to kind of bring that to light to people who might not otherwise be exposed to that is, I think, important.
And I want to be clear, I echo Julie's comment about how, you hear from folks who are conservative saying that some of the views are buried, and there may be an inclination to think, oh, that's being exaggerated, but it sounds like you're saying that's actually happening. And so how is it you're saying this is a tool on All Sides website where we can go and search? Can you walk folks through that again? Which of your or many tools is the one to use for that?
Yeah, so our balance search tool, if you just go up to the corner and click the little magnifying glass like a normal search, it will first show you search results from our website, but then there will be a little button on the right that says search the web. And then you can search the web and filter by left, right, and center. And I think it is also important to mention about perspectives from the right being buried, that lean left sources are by and large just a lot bigger, right? So if you're looking at like say something international, sources like Associated Press is on the left, like ABC News, and then you have like BBC and Reuters in the center. Those cover international news more. Sources on the right just don't cover international news as much because they're not as big. So I'm not entirely I don't want to blame search engines and be like, oh, they're prioritizing views on the left. I think a lot of times things like the Associated Press and NPR are simply larger than a lot of conservative outlets. So that is a factor as well. But at the same time, it is hard to find conservative perspectives. I will say, if you keep an eye out, sneak peek, we have a research brief coming out pretty soon on various different search engines and when you search certain topics, how many sources they display on the left, right, and center to kind of break that down for people.
Awesome. You heard it here first. We
You
have
did.
another question coming in from Joe. Thank you so much, Joe. And I think I may have something. I'll read his and we'll see what we cover here. But I says I suspect that even searching for progressive stories on the left side, you will not see as much coverage of third, fourth, and fifth party candidates like Jill Stein, Claudia de la Cruz, or Cornel West. How do you dig for stories on contenders that are not covered by traditional media?
Yeah, that's 100% true. And we have a lot of kind of debate about how much do we cover candidates that people consider are like quote unquote not serious candidates. How
Mm.
much do we, cover the two major contenders in this race versus also independent candidates who I and a lot of other people think are valuable, and the inclusion of their perspectives might push the two main candidates to clarify things or change things or just reconsider particular topics. So again, that's like another way we try and keep our team balanced. I know it looks really simple to have this left-right spectrum, but you find working within it, there are also a lot of limitations, and we struggle with how to keep it simple for the average person to understand and how to capture the fact that not everything's left-right. There's also this like establishment versus not establishment component to it. It's not just Democrat, Republican. You have these other, third parties and things involved. And we have someone on our team that was really involved in helping run the Libertarian Party locally. And we have a blog on Meet the Over 1,000 candidates that have registered to run for office in
Wow.
2024. And then in addition, we have our voter guide series where we tell you the stance of each candidate on the economy, on taxes, on a bunch of different issues. And we include Jill Stein, Cornel West, Chase Oliver. We included third party candidates because when people are coming to us to get information about a topic, my cat wants to join us. But we know when people want to find information about a topic and we're claiming to give them all sides, we should give them all sides and what people are coming to look for is not just the mainstream positions, but every position kind of on the map. That it's also our obligation to show them those third party candidates when it's appropriate. So they may not always make it to the top of the biggest story today on every news outlet, but we do make sure that we're including them in our content as much as possible because people are curious about that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think you've captured a big struggle in advocacy and as we're communicating that tension between, we want it to be simple, we want things to be accessible, but the world is really complicated. And so
Yeah.
how do you capture all that? The fact that, news outlets, I think many of us are aware that the, local news is struggling. It's not the same environment we had 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And so there's the reality of some limitations. And I think piggybacking on Joe's question, question I have for you is I hear a lot of people say as a kind of confirmation of that one source is trustworthy because it's covering stories that no one else is covering. And so I've heard people interpret that as, well, that must mean the other outlets are hiding things. And I'm curious what your response. I've not been able to come up with a satisfactory response to share with people. Like, what would you say to that?
I mean, I would say it is possible that they're hiding something. It's also possible that they just have different focus depending on who their writers are. As I said, we all come to the table with our different biases and what we're interested in. I have certain interests in politics that I will like willingly go read about when I am off the clock. And I have certain things that I'm like, I just don't understand or care about the economic consequences of farming in like Wisconsin. I don't know anything about it. So I think the if you have an outlet that's covering something and you're not seeing it covered elsewhere, then it could be true that other outlets aren't covering it because they don't care about it. It could be true that they're not covering it because they haven't seen the story. Maybe there's not really good backing to the story. It doesn't mean the story's wrong just because only one outlet's covering it, but it's important to consider that there are many possibilities, I think, for why it might not be covered. And we do try and kind of uplift that on all sides in terms of like the right may not be covering this story because it doesn't align with their beliefs that kind of disprove something. Or it might be that, like I said, the right doesn't cover as much international news because they're smaller. So there are like a great number of reasons why something might not be covered, that it's important to consider. And I think we try and highlight as much as possible why those differences exist.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. And it sounds like something going forward, I could ask them, what is the story you're seeing? Send them to all
Right.
sides and hopefully get a little bit more nuance rather than just saying it's only covered in one place, therefore it must, however we're filling in those blanks. Um, yeah. Can you share a bit more? I'm curious with the disagree better. Folks may recognize that phrase from the National Governors Association. Can you share more? Are you working with them at all? Or is that a coincidence that those phrases both pop up?
Yeah, I use that phrase because I really like that phrase. I like the message of it. That we're not trying to condense people into some sort of center or make them agree or force common ground. We are genuinely trying to see the ways in which we disagree. We aren't currently working with the National Governors Association. And my cat just knocked
I love
everything,
that your cat has an
but
interest in this.
he does, he really does. But we aren't currently working with them because in my opinion, I don't think the media and the government should really cross over too much. I know people have varying, again, all sides. There are many opinions about um, whether the media's role is to always be adversarial towards government
Mhm.
and to be a check on government, or whether it's, kind of allowed to be favorable towards certain candidates and certain government policies and government initiatives. And so I know we have followers that are really skeptical of the government and would say that journalists should always kind of be attacking corruption, be attacking any sort of government policy. They shouldn't take allegiances.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of the reason that we've chosen not to directly associate ourselves with the National Governors Campaign, just because, again, not wanting to be neutral for everyone, whatever their opinion is on the role of journalism and how it relates to government. But I very much personally love the work that they're doing and love all the organizations that they're uplifting.
Yeah. I think it comes back to what you mentioned earlier, how there's so many different organizations and, across beyond organizations in government as well, that their association in that case of pushing forward for, the disagreeing better to have better, more respectful conversations, even as we may not like reach a point where we're all in complete agreement, we can at least be more civil along the way. We do have time for some more questions. I have a couple. I'm curious, in all of this work, what is something that surprised you?
That's a good question. I think um, something that's surprising is that there are just certain instances where bias doesn't play out in the way that you think it does. Um, like there are obvious cases with immigration and abortion, big issues where you kind of know where the left and the right stand. But there are also surprising ways that they converge and diverge on different issues. Um, like I said, even understanding how international news like is always covered by lean left outlets and not outlets on the right. And so I'm always like, am I getting the full picture? Because these outlets have a specific bias, but also they're
Mhm.
the only ones with the capacity to cover this story. And there's really interesting dynamics, especially like we've been talking a lot about Israel and Palestine over the last few months. And there are issues like that that kind of shake up the entire political spectrum in terms of you have people that are on the left on every issue, except being very supportive of Israel. And it's like, do you even consider, you know, Israel and Hamas or Israel and Palestine a left-right thing? It doesn't exactly align with the spectrum. It aligns with people's deeply held personal beliefs and convictions and experiences in the world. And so there are issues like that that just don't fit neither of them. And there are also we've talked about several outlets that don't fit neatly because they're very like anti-establishment and they'll fight anyone who they perceive to be kind of in power. And it's like, is that kind of right coded nowadays? But do they care about the same issues as the right believes? So there are some interesting, I think, complexities and nuance around like what does it actually mean to be on the left and the right? And there are these big issues, but what about your kind of approach to these issues? And whether you trust the CDC or you don't trust the CDC, the right now really doesn't trust it with vaccines, but it used to be that the left really didn't trust it with vaccines and with other issues. And so to kind of see the change over time of the political landscape and how things that used to be free speech used to be a very like left value, and now it's kind of a right value, debatably. And so it's interesting to see those shifts and try and figure out how do we categorize it in this constantly shifting landscape.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting where my mind goes with that is back to your red blue translator, which of course there are folks who consider themselves purple or neither, but generally, how is that language? How are we using that? How are we defining free speech as we all the shifting around the thinking it's complicated stuff for sure. Of all of this, and we've still got the questions open if folks have more. Oh, I see one pop up. Okay. Can you share more about your civil dialogue services?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're definitely looking to do more in the future. We're going to call it All Sides Roundtables, but what we have done in the past as well is America Talks was a big event with a lot of bridging organizations involved, including us, helping support. We got USA Today and a bunch of promotional partners to help. I think we had several thousand Americans sign up, and we helped facilitate that as well and have them actually talk to each other, talk to a few strangers that they were paired up with through some political prompts. And then I briefly mentioned in the beginning, we also have Mismatch, which is a tool specifically for schools that we work with
Mm.
to help students connect with other students in different areas. And then we also are partnered with Living Room Conversations, which has these great conversation guides that people can use on many different topics. And so you can download some of those guides and talk with the people in your life about particular issues. So we're definitely looking to do a lot more in dialogue services in the future. But we have done some in the past as well, just partnering with bridging organizations and helping people kind of get the information they need to navigate these conversations and these questions.
Fabulous. Thank you. I'm imagining already our list of resources, both that will accompany the video when we share this with folks, and then on our YouTube channel will be lengthy and delightful for people to dive into. Of all the things we've covered today, what is one thing that you want folks to take away? What's the one thing you want people to remember?
I would say, one takeaway is just to have a healthy skepticism towards news when you're reading it, but to have kind of robust trust in each other, in the
Mhm.
people in your community, I think. No one is, it's easy to forget that the people on the other side, they aren't evil or stupid or any of those things that, it's easy to think if you sit and read the news all day, but to actually go out and do something in your community with different people, and you aren't even thinking about their political beliefs often. You're thinking about how do we build this garden together, right? And so I think it's important to really value the people in your life and ask some curious questions. But when you're reading a news story, similarly, ask curious questions about what perspective you're not seeing, what perspective is buried at the bottom of the article, or what bias might this be coming from, where it might be omitting something or slanting something. And so it's important to recognize those things and to also recognize that like this is one journalist trying their best to show you what the world is like, and you also can have your own view about the world and what you've experienced, and those things can coexist and complement each other.
I appreciate that so much. That having, some skepticism around media, but more trust in each other. I will absolutely be taking that into the weekend. Thank you, Claire, for sharing all of these resources and your time today. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is an ongoing series. We keep it free because we want as many people to be able to access this content as possible. Next month, October, is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we'll be joined by someone who will talk not just about burnout and understanding it, but how to prevent it. Don't be discouraged if you feel like I'm already, you're already there. There's going to be tips for you as well. So I hope you'll be able to join us. When you leave the webinar, a quick poll will pop up, about 15 seconds or so. If you would be a helper and fill that out, we really value your input. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Claire. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you next month.